minister can try to weasel out of responsibility for this all that he wants, but parents know, education workers know, this is on the minister and this is on the premier. The government had so many other options. They have spent months drafting this legislation instead of negotiating a fair deal at the table. They refused to come to the table this week, displaying a fundamental misunderstanding of how labor relations work. CUPE offered a counter-proposal this week. The government rejected it. The government could have turned to binding arbitration. They refused that option. They still have 12 hours to go where they could be at the table, and instead the government has walked away. The minister wanted this, the minister is getting this, and thanks to the minister, my kids are going to be home tomorrow, and many of your kids are going to be home tomorrow. It is the minister who has caused this disruption to our schools. And parents also know that it's the minister that has underinvested in our schools, has created the shortages in education workers and supports that we're already seeing, has created a situation where education workers feel like their backs are against the wall, and if they don't get a wage increase, they're going to have to leave the sector. It is time for the minister to take some responsibility, actually do his job, negotiate a settlement that will keep our kids in school. And what happens tomorrow doesn't change that. It will be up to the minister to put a stop to the disruptions by coming to the table and reaching a settlement with CUPE. I'm happy to take your questions.
So what now? Should they go on strike tomorrow? Are you supporting the idea of them going on strike tomorrow?
Well, I can tell you that New Democrats tomorrow will be out standing in solidarity with education workers and parents across the province who are expressing their outrage at this government's policies on education and demanding that our kids have the caring adults and fundamental supports that they deserve in the classroom. And I hope that the minister will be coming to the table to settle this with a deal finally.
Isn't that a slippery slope, though? You're supporting something that's going to be illegal. The notwithstanding clause is part of the Constitution. What they're doing is legal, and what the union's going to be doing tomorrow is not. Is that a concern for you?
What the union is doing tomorrow is political protest, and as far as I know, Doug Ford has not tried to rule political protest unconstitutional in Ontario yet.
And it's cool to do that and have kids out of school.
My kids are out of school tomorrow because of the minister. And so my kids may be joining and getting a lesson in political protest, thanks to the minister. Did the minister tell them to go on strike? Well, labor relations work by averting a strike, by negotiating a deal at the table, and the minister has refused to be at the table to avert a strike.
Chandra, 2.5% per year, that is more than a lot of people get. A lot of people, especially in these times, aren't getting 2.5%. Some might be getting 1%, some might not be getting anything at all. Why is 2.5% not enough, in your view, for an educational worker?
I agree, Colin. A lot of people in Ontario are struggling, and I think it speaks to the larger low-wage policies of this government. But education workers in particular have seen 10 years of wage suppression under successive governments. They are in a position where a quarter of them have had to cut back on food or use food banks. We've heard many heartbreaking stories in our offices this week about the financial situations that education workers are finding themselves in. One library tech in my riding who supports 620 kids at 2 different schools wrote to me that she's doing yard duty in shoes with holes in them because she can't afford to replace her shoes. At a certain point, it becomes unsustainable to do this job. Using food banks to do your job is unsustainable. And so the government needs to come to the table with a deal that allows workers to keep doing this job, or we're going to see in education what's already happened in healthcare, which is workers leaving the sector in droves, and then our system driven to the brink of collapse. And at the end of the day, it's our kids who pay the price for that. It's already our kids who are paying the price for the shortage of supports in schools. And if we drive more workers away, it's our kids who continue to pay the price. And it's the most vulnerable kids who need those supports the most, the kids with accessibility needs, the youngest kids in our school system who pay the biggest price for that.
The minister said multiple times that he's used every tool to try to avoid this, but you mentioned binding arbitration. Why do you think the government didn't use that tool?
I can't speak for the government's strategic choices in this situation. I also don't know why they started working on this legislation weeks ago instead of coming to the table and negotiating.
Yes.
The minister wanted this outcome.
Why would that be?
The minister enjoys the disruption. This is the same minister that could have avoided disruptions to our school kids throughout the pandemic by making the investments that would have kept schools open, like ensuring that every school had access to rapid tests. There were parents in Ottawa who were fundraising in order to get rapid tests for their schools. There were parents who were fundraising to get HEPA filters in classrooms. The minister refused to make those investments. He refused to invest in smaller class sizes. And once again, we see him refusing to make investments that would have avoided disruptions.
Said that it will strike until there's a negotiated deal. What if this goes on? I mean, how long do you think this can go on realistically before kids, it's just too much disruption for them in the school year?
After 2.5 years, I don't want to see our kids experience any disruption, but all the cards are in the minister's hands here. He can come to the table at any point, even tomorrow once CUPE is out, to reach a settlement that will end the disruptions and get our kids back in school.
Une question en français. Qu'est-ce que vous pensez de la situation dans laquelle on est rendu maintenant?
Je suis très déçue. C'est nos enfants qui vont payer pour les disruptions. Est-ce que je peux dire ça en français? OK. C'est nos enfants qui vont payer pour les disruptions. C'est l'intransigeance du ministre qui nous a rendu à ce résultat. Il a eu beaucoup d'occasions de négocier une convention fair, raisonnable et juste avec les travailleurs et les travailleuses en éducation. Il a refusé. Il a pu donner son accord au proposal. Oui, il a pu donner son accord à l'offre du STFP cette semaine. Il a refusé. Il peut être à la table maintenant pour essayer de trouver une solution et il a décidé de partir. Thanks.
Thank you.